episode 31. Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, Dogmen. Our guest tonight hails from Australia, where he had an encounter when he was 15 or 16 years old. Keiron Pittman, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
You're welcome.
For starters, Keiron, if you don't mind, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I live in Australia in a little town called Gloucester. I'm 25 years old, and that's about all there is to me. I'm a bit of a gamer. I read books. I have a girlfriend and her two lovely kids. They're my stepchildren, and we sort of get by in life.
I want to ask you, as far as the Dogman topic goes, Keiron, how's it looked at in Australia?
Well, as far as I know, it doesn't appear to be on the radar at all. It really doesn't seem to show up. I haven't heard of anyone else seeing anything like it or talking about them. I've never run into someone who had a similar experience or anything like that. To me, I guess it's not really known, if that makes sense.
When did you first hear about Dogmen?
Do you mean Dogman or my experience?
When was the first time that you knew that there was supposed to be something out there, whether in Australia or any other place in the world that people called Dogmen?
The first time I ran into it was when my girlfriend showed me this show on YouTube. Before then, I thought I was the only person in the world to have run into one. So I really didn't know what to call them or what to make of them. I tried Google searching a few different things and nothing ever came up with it, but I tried to get as much information as I could on the old school werewolf tales, because that to me was the closest thing I could relate to the creature I saw. She showed me your radio show, and I suddenly knew that I wasn't the only person on the planet to have seen one, and I wanted to share my tales. So,
well, that's interesting. You know, you're not the only person who's seen one of these things that thought that they were the only one in the world that had been through such an encounter. That's one of the reasons why I created the website, dogmanencounters.com, and I created the show, was to try and get the word out, especially to people like that thought that, unfortunately, it was only them that had been through such a situation. If you don't mind, please set up for us the chain of events that led to you having your encounter with that Dogman.
Well, it was about 10 years ago. I can't remember the exact date. It was a really hot summer here in Australia, and I was living in a house in Watanobbi with my family. And the day had got to about 50 degrees Celsius, so it was just a really stinking hot day. It was about 11:30, 12 o'clock, sometime around then at night, and I'd been laying in bed for a few hours trying to get some sleep, and it was still really hot in the house. So I got up and went to the kitchen and grabbed a glass of water, and I went back down the little hallway, and straight opposite my room at the time was the laundry and then the back door onto a little step. So I just walked out there and stood out in the cool air to cool down, and I was having a drink of water and looking out at there's a big empty paddock next to the house, and all behind us is all bush and scrubland, and I love just standing out there and, you know, looking at the empty paddocks and the empty fields and forests and woodlands and that. So I was standing out there having a cool drink, relaxing, and trying to get cool down to go back inside to have a sleep, when I either heard something or I felt something, or I wanted to, for whatever reason, look to my left, which was down the backyard. So I turned and looked down the yard, and that's when I saw the creature.
How old were you when you had that encounter?
I think I was between birthdays. I was either 15 or 16. I can't remember. I'm leaning more towards 16, but I can't really remember exactly how old I was.
It's not like there's an age where it is a good thing to have an encounter, but that's especially still too young to have one. You're just not prepared for something like that. Again, not that you ever are prepared for an encounter with something like a Dogman at any age, but being 15 or 16, that's especially hard. If you don't mind, continue on from there. When you turned, looked, and saw the Dogman, what happened then?
Well, I turned and I looked, and about 15 to 20 meters away, which in feet I think's about 50 to 60 feet, somewhere in that range, was the back fence. And just outside of the back fence, squatting down, was a very black, dark shadow shape. And I focused on it. It took a second or so for my brain to register that that's not just a shadow, it was something. And looking at it, to me, it looked like a dark, shaggy human with very long hair, very well built, not super muscular, but very strong muscle definition would be the right word. Looking at the creature, it was looking down the yard, down the hill, towards the side fence that I had just been looking out over, and I was looking straight at it. It had its left hand resting up on the top of the fence, and its right hand was between its knees as it knelt there to brace itself, I guess. And that's when the creature turned its head and looked straight at me. It had a dog's muzzle, or a wolf's muzzle. It had pointed ears, very thick, dark fur all over the back of its head and its neck and its shoulders. In places thicker and thinner, but it was completely covered in hair. And it had these eyes that I'll never forget, these piercing blue human-like eyes that just stared straight through me. We locked eyes. I stared at it for, I said forever. It felt like minutes passed, but really it must have only been two to 3 seconds. And in that 2 or 3 seconds, it felt to me like the creature assessed me, whether I was predator, a threat, food, what I was, and for whatever reason it decided I wasn't worth its time. I just got that feeling that it wasn't worth going after me, and that's when I basically ran away. I freaked out pretty hardcore. I don't really remember much of what happened next. I must have gone inside, closed the door and locked it behind me, and I ran inside. I grabbed a letter opener, a silver letter opener, and climbed into my wardrobe, closed the door behind me, and that's where my parents found me in the morning. I was still sitting in the bottom of the wardrobe, clutching this thing. I'd fallen asleep at some point in the night. I don't know how. I honestly went into a bit of a state of shock, I think. I really don't remember what happened. And, yeah, that was basically my whole encounter. It must have only been a 5 to 10 second look at the creature, but I'll never forget it. It's burned into my mind.
Oh, I can understand that. I'm so glad you didn't let the wind out of your parents with that silver letter opener when they opened up that door in the morning.
Oh, they called my name, and I banged. I must have moved half waking up, and they opened the door, and there I was, still sitting in the wardrobe with the letter opener in my hands. I don't know why I grabbed a silver letter opener over a knife. Part of me thinks instinctually I just associated it straight away with a werewolf, which, as I said before, is the only creature that comes close to what I saw. At the time, I didn't know about Dogmen or anything like that, so I just, werewolf from movie, werewolf in backyard, and I just went with that, you know, and that's basically my entire encounter.
Of all the werewolf movies that you've seen, Keiron, which movie represents the Dogman that you saw the closest?
I've wondered that, because after I saw it, I really began to want to know more about werewolves, so I looked into every werewolf movie, I read werewolf books, I looked up the first werewolf encounter in Germany, in the Black Forest. I went a little werewolf crazy, to be honest. The closest I would have to say is a toss-up between the British movie Dog Soldiers or the Underworld movies. Not the one where they look more like cats, but the one where they've given them the proper muzzle. It's sort of a mix between the two, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it sure does. The Underworld movies are mentioned quite often when it comes to eyewitnesses describing how the dogman that they saw looked. So I'm not surprised at all to hear you reference that movie when you're trying to describe the one that you saw. Now, having said all of that, did you get a chance to take a look at its legs? I know you said that you saw it had its right hand down between its legs as it was kind of crouched there. You're saying that its right arm was kind of used to support its weight?
Maybe it was just a comfortable position, but it was touching the ground with its right hand between its knees. To be honest, it looked like an elongated dog's hind leg. It had the dog's ankle with that reverse sort of angle from the feet to the ankle. That joint looked like a dog's, especially how it was tucked up underneath its backside, and its knee bent like ours did.
So it did have hocks, just like a dog or a horse would.
Yes, that's the correct word, hocks. Sorry, I was struggling for a word there.
If it had hocks like that, dogs and horses, instead of having what's called a knee, they've got what's called a stifle joint. It's a flatter type of knee horizontally than what a hominid-style knee would look like. Is that what this had, or was its knee more human-like in appearance, rounder?
The way it was kneeling, it had to have been more human-like, I'd say. It looked exactly like, I don't know if you've seen a ninja movie when they crouch down and they've got their feet underneath their backsides. That's exactly the knee shape it had. It was bent and the knee nearly doubled over on itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Now, when you're describing the fur on this dog, man, I wasn't totally clear on what you were describing there. Were you saying that it almost had a form of a mane up around its head, neck, and shoulders?
Yeah, the fur, the only thing I could sort of compare it to would be, do you know some dog breeds and wolves, like a husky, how they have a lot of thick fur right behind its shoulders and around the back of their neck? That's what it looked like. The hair or fur was a lot thicker there. And then on the rest of its body, although it was there, it got slightly thinner all the way down to the hands and the bottom half of the leg, the ankle from the hock down sort of thing. I didn't really see what fur was on it. I just remember the shoulders and the back of the head and even halfway down its back sort of thing were very thick fur.
Did you ever get an idea what it was focused on before it turned its head and looked at you?
As far as I could tell, I mean, I'd just been looking in the same direction it had, and the paddock which led to there was probably a 200-metre or 200-yard empty space of grassland, followed by a bit of a brushy, wooded area. And as far as I could tell, there was absolutely nothing in there. I didn't see anything before I looked at it. It seemed to be quite intent on that area. I don't know if I gasped or something, but it sort of snapped its head towards me, and that's when I freaked out.
Well, if you did gasp, I don't think anyone could blame you. That's for sure. What kind of size estimate would you give on this thing?
Well, the fence would have been between 5 and 6 feet tall, and kneeling down it was coming up about halfway. So standing fully erect, I would have to estimate at least 6 to 7 feet, maybe 8. It'd be within that size range. Its arms looked quite comfortable reaching from halfway down the fence to the top of the fence. Its elbow was slightly bent, so it had to have been quite tall.
Yeah, I'd say it sure sounds like it. Since you're in the beginning stages of familiarizing yourself with my show, you might not know that the type of dogman that you saw is what I refer to as being a canine type.
it very clearly had a very canine muzzle with the sharp teeth showing on the sides, and they were white in the half moon. There was a half moon out, so I really clearly saw the creature. Like I said, the first thing that I thought of in the morning was a werewolf. That was it's the closest I knew at the time to it.
Oh, I don't think anyone could blame you for coming to that conclusion. Not having anything else to compare it to, that's the only conclusion that you could be expected to make. That next morning, Keiron, when your parents found you in the wardrobe, how did they react? Did you share the details of that encounter? Tell them what had happened the night before right there in the spot? If so, what kind of reaction did you get?
In the morning, when my parents ushered me out of the wardrobe, it took me a little while to get my thoughts together enough to explain it. Like, I'm talking 1 or 2 minutes. Dad just kept saying, "What were you doing in there? Why weren't you in your bed? What happened? What happened, son? What happened?" And Mum was nervous. She was sort of hovering around behind Dad. And I just said, "Look, this is what I saw." And I told them exactly what I've told you. I went out the back. I saw this dark, and I said to them at the time, this dark, dog-like werewolf creature, this thing in the backyard, Mum and Dad. I saw this. And Mum, she's a very open sort of person. She said, "Oh, well, you saw something. Do you think it was a..." And she started sort of trying to put it as it was not there to hurt me, some sort of weird animal totem or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. My mum is a bit of a hippie, to be honest. And Dad, he did the age-old, I guess the typical father thing. He just wanted to calm me down. I was shaking and wandering around the house. I was looking out windows. I was getting anxious, raising my voice even to try and, "Dad, there's something out there." And he said, "Look, son, you probably saw a large black dog trying to get over the fence, jumping out of our yard." We had a lot of chickens at the time. His thought was maybe there was a dog trying to get some of the chickens, and I busted it, so it took off over the fence. I said, "No, Dad, He said, we'll go and have a look." So very reluctantly, we went out the back, unlocked the door. I said, "Did you hear me slam the door?" They said, "No, you didn't slam it. We heard you close the door." So I don't know, maybe I went into a zombie mode of some description, because I didn't run and I didn't slam the door. I just quietly walked inside and got in my wardrobe. We went outside, and my glass of water I had dropped was sitting on the grass. Thankfully it didn't break. It had just fallen straight from the back step onto the grass, and we wandered down to the back fence, and I don't know how I did it. I'm glad my dad was there, because I don't think I would have gone without my father around. I was very, very nervous. We're not allowed firearms in Australia. Or, well, we are allowed firearms, but you need special licenses and et cetera, et cetera. So we didn't have a gun or anything. And we looked around the fence line. Dad started walking up and down the fence line, and he ended up jumping the fence, and he pointed out a very large canine footprint. It looked just like a dog's footprint, except it was probably the size of a bread and butter plate. It was massive. And he said, "See, you saw just a really large dog climbing back over to get into the bushland. Maybe it was a feral dog, and it had got mange, and that's why it looked strange." And I didn't believe him, but I said, "Yeah, Dad, that's probably what I saw, just to get it over and done with. I'd had enough. I just wanted to get inside and forget about it, or try and put it out of my mind." So that was it.
Wow, that's a tough situation to deal with. When you have people that support you, when you tell them about the encounters that you had, or the encounter that you had, that makes it so much easier than when you're not believed, like it sounds like was the case in your situation there. I'm sure your dad had to realize that even the biggest dog's not going to leave a print the size of a bread plate like that.
I've never spoken to my father about it since, so I have a sneaking suspicion that although he realised that maybe it wasn't just a dog, I think he just wanted me to calm down. I don't think he wanted me to be afraid anymore. Like I said, I was shaking, I was walking around, looking out windows, I was nervous. It actually took me quite a few days to be comfortable enough to go out after 6 p.m. when the sun was starting to set. I was that nervous. Yeah, I think possibly Dad knew that it wasn't, because he's not anti-paranormal, he's not anti-religious or any such thing like that. My dad very, very clearly says, there's things out there that we don't know, but at the same time I don't think he wanted me to be afraid anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense, but at that point, you knowing that they were out there, it would only be understandable if you did show a lot more caution whenever you went out to do, you name it. Are you still, 10 years later now, after that encounter, are you still having trouble doing things that you took for granted before you had that encounter, such as taking out the trash or just being outside, period, after dark?
Not every day, not all the time. I smoke cigarettes, and the rule around the house is we all go outside to have a cigarette. Whoever's smoking, you just go sit out the front or out the back and have a smoke. And some nights when it gets late and the whole town's very quiet and there's a certain amount of fog around, or maybe the weather's just right, it pops into my mind while I'm having my smoke, and I'll start looking up the street and looking down the back fence and just double checking to make sure that the creature hasn't tracked me down somehow or something like that. Besides that, my girlfriend and I go camping during the hotter months, and I'll quite often spend the entire night sitting up by the fire, just making sure that nothing comes around that shouldn't be around. It pops into my mind from time to time, and it's stuck with me, without a doubt.
Well, that's understandable. I'm impressed that you're able to sit up all night by the fire like that when you're camping after what you've been through. That's really impressive.
Well, I guess it's something my father taught me. It's the man's role to do those things. One funny story, we had a possum walk into the camp, and it was my job to escort this possum out. So, as I said before, I've worked with dangerous animals. I've worked with poisonous reptiles and 20-foot saltwater crocodiles. I've worked with cattle. I've worked with possums and kangaroos, and none of them bother me. Nothing. I think you could drop me in with a lion, and at least I know what it is. I understand it. And this Dogman, the Dogman or the werewolf or whatever it was I saw, it's otherworldly. It had this powerful presence about it, and it just sort of, it didn't sit with what I'd been taught at school. It didn't sit with science. It didn't make sense, and that's, I think, what scared me the most about it, is that it doesn't belong, if that makes sense.
That does make really good sense. From a very early age on, you're taught by your parents and society as a whole that monsters don't exist, and that's hammered into your head time and time again, all the way through your life. When one day you have an encounter like the one that you had that shows you that that's not true, that monsters do exist, it's only natural for that to turn your life upside down. I'm just so impressed that you've been able to deal with that encounter so well. Most people that see these things do not handle the encounter nearly as well as what you have.
I'm probably going to sound like a complete idiot now, but I would like to see it again, but at a distance of about 300 yards with a rifle in my hands. Not to shoot it, but I would love to see it again just to confirm that what I saw really happened and that it's really out there. And to say I'm not curious would be a lie. I want to know more about it. I want to know, what does it eat? Does it hunt humans? Does it hunt kangaroos? Do they mate? Do they have 10 puppies? I would love to be able to learn more about these creatures, but from a safe distance with a gun in my hands.
Well, understand, the gun's not going to offer you nearly as much safety as what you might think.
That's pretty much what I said to my girlfriend. I said to her, I don't think a gun would have stopped it if it really wanted you. I listened to one of your shows just recently about these young teenagers running away from the Dogman, and it caught up to them and tore one of their shirts. And I said to my girlfriend, if it got close enough to tear a shirt, it could have killed them. There's no way they could have outrun it. I don't know if they do mock charges like a gorilla or if they just try to get you away from them, but they definitely, the feeling I got from it was like a lion in a cage, like that pure natural power that if it wanted me off that back step, if it wanted to get into the house to get me, it could have. And for whatever reason, it decided not to. It might have been busy doing something else, or it might have just said, oh, it's not worth all the hassle. I don't know, but it really, that's the one thing I took away from it, that to them, we're nothing. We're not strong enough, we're not fast enough, we're not smart enough, we haven't got big enough guns to stop them. That's the feeling that I took away. It didn't appear aggressive to me at all. It seemed actually completely uninterested, indifferent to me. It looked at me and I didn't see it snarl, it didn't growl, it flicked its ears towards me when it looked, but beyond that it didn't appear to show any sort of interest in me whatsoever. So maybe it was a vegetarian, I don't know, but it definitely had this air of pure natural power, like I'd imagine a grizzly bear to have, that presence, and I just knew that if it wanted me, it could easily have taken me.
You made so many good points there. I'm going to try and make sure I address all of them that I can recall. The first thing I want to address that you just said there, since it was only 60 or so feet away when you saw it, you're right on the money. If it wanted to close that distance and get you, it could do that so quick there wouldn't be all that much that you'd be able to do. And also you mentioned if it wanted to get into the house, it could. I'm sure it wouldn't be any trouble for it to do that. So you're right on the money with that as well. To back up and address something that you mentioned earlier, you talked about it having blue eyes. That might seem very strange, the idea that something like a Dogman could have blue eyes, but just like you're not the first person in the world to encounter one of these things, Keiron, you're not the first person to report seeing a Dogman that had blue eyes either. There's a gentleman in Michigan that reported seeing a Dogman at his door that had sparkling blue eyes. So, yeah, you're not the only one that's seen that. I'm not sure if that makes it even creepier or what, as if they're not creepy as can be all on their own.
That's what I meant before when I said I'm curious. I would love to find out why some have red eyes and some have blue eyes. All the shows I've listened to of yours, they have red eyes. Now that you've told me that other people do have blue-eyed Dogman encounters, it's very reassuring, but at the same time it just makes me more curious about the creature. They're so different. I would love to know more about them.
Well, if you ever do have a chance to study one, I sure hope you study it at a very far distance. Don't make that mistake of getting too close.
Yeah, don't worry, I'll have binoculars and a telescope. That'll be about as close as I want to be.
That's much better. Yeah, curiosity killed the cat, and if you made that mistake, you just might wind up being the cat. Also, too, I don't want you to second guess yourself. You talked about how you'd like to see one again, just to reinforce that you did, in fact, see one that night. I don't need to tell you, you did see what you thought you saw. You're not crazy. That did happen, unfortunately. Fortunately, though, that Dogman, like you said, wasn't outwardly aggressive towards you. It sounds like it was flat out benign, which is as good as that encounter could have been.
It wasn't there to be nice to me. If I'd gone closer, it might have reacted. I don't know, but to me, the one feeling I got was, you're beneath me, I'm too busy. It had that real sense of just, kind of like, I don't know if you've had cats, but you know when a cat and you're calling their name and they look at you and then sort of go, whatever, and look away? That's the feeling I got. Instead of being interested and wanting to be anything to do with me, it was like, you're so far beneath me right now, go away. That's the feeling I got from it. I don't know.
You know what, Keiron? You're not the first person to report feeling that either. I've heard that on more than one occasion where an eyewitness reported getting that feeling like it felt like it was superior to the eyewitness. And it was hard for them to describe, but that was the gist of the feeling that they got. I'm superior to you. As long as you don't challenge my superiority or authority, everything's going to be all right.
To be honest, it almost felt like it had better things to do. That's the exact feeling I got from it. Just no interest in me whatsoever. I might have been invisible as far as it's concerned.
Well, I'm so glad it had that mindset. I've talked to quite a few people who ran into dogmen that did not have that mindset. The alternative is not nearly as good as what you ran into that night. Trust me.
As I said, if it had been aggressive, I don't know if I'd be standing here in one piece. It honestly was close enough that I'm surprised I couldn't hear it breathing. It was that close, and looking at it, I know it could have closed that gap within seconds, faster than Usain Bolt. For whatever reason, it just wasn't interested.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very grateful for that.
You and me both. Having been through that encounter, if you had to make the unfortunate decision on whether you would encounter another dogman or if you would encounter a yowie, which one would you rather have to encounter?
Oh, without a doubt, a yowie. Without a doubt. My girlfriend's very interested in yowies. She's part Aboriginal, which is, I guess, like a Native American to Australia. From everything I've watched and seen and heard with her, the only attacks that a Bigfoot or a yowie or any similar sort of creature make seems to be more just go away from me. This is my territory, leave me alone, I'll throw rocks and sticks at you, shake your tent. They don't seem to actually want to hurt humans, whereas this thing, it didn't seem friendly.
I actually know of people who were unfortunately attacked by a dogman. So it does happen. We're talking about asking questions that only someone that had that type of a close-up and personal encounter would be able to answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't like it to happen to me.
Understandably so. That wouldn't be good. You mentioned, Keiron, that your girlfriend is Aboriginal. I'm curious, what type of legends and Aboriginal lore has she shared with you about dogmen and how they're talked about in their culture?
Well, my girlfriend's not an elder. She's part of the Aboriginal Council and she works with the Aboriginal children at the schools. She's only part Aboriginal herself. As far as she knows, there's no tales of dogmen. She knows a lot about the hairy man, which is the Aboriginal sort of catch-all for the yowie. They call it the hairy man. There's a few other names for them as well, but she knows there's a lot of tales about them. Even in where I've moved to now, there's tales of hairy man in the region. But as far as dogman goes, she said she's never heard of anything to do with them in Aboriginal tales or stories or anything like that. So maybe they came with the Europeans. I don't know.
As far as the areas go where I hear about encounters, I've got to tell you that Australia, lucky for you, Australia seems to be one of the areas that has a lower amount of encounters than a lot of other areas. With the way encounters seem to be increasing over time, I wouldn't be surprised if you hearing about these kind of encounters becomes more common, maybe even a lot more common. I hope that doesn't happen, but like I said, I wouldn't be surprised.
Australia's so big and so very empty. We're a huge country and we've got such a small population that there are just millions and millions of acres for the creatures to hide in. So I wouldn't be surprised if as our population grows and we start encroaching on more of their territory, the encounters with dogmen do go up. I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me either. Like you mentioned, you've got so much unoccupied land there where people just don't go.
That's right. Watanobbi and the Central Coast is quite a sizable area by Australian standards, and my next door paddock went for kilometres of just empty farmland, the occasional thicket of brush, trees, and then behind the house was all national parks right up to the freeway and then the other side of it. So we're talking just where I lived in quite a populous area, there was hundreds of acres there of just empty bushland.
If you had that much open land where people didn't go outside of Watanobbi there, after you had your encounter, did you hear about anyone else having a Dogman encounter?
Absolutely nothing. I've heard nothing in the area when I was living there, and I've heard nothing since. I still have some friends who live down there, and I haven't exactly asked, have you heard of any werewolf sightings in the area, but no one's mentioned anything to me, so as far as I know, I was the only one in the region to have seen one. Possibly others have, and I just don't know them, or they haven't reported it, or maybe they don't know who to report it to, if you know what I mean, but as far as I know, I'm the only one to have seen one there.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised in the least if you were not the only person in that area to have an encounter. Understand that most people who see these things seem not to want to share it with the public and put it out there. They might tell close friends and family about that encounter, but in more cases than not, it's not something that they're going to broadcast out there where people outside their close circles are ever going to hear about it.
It's like, if you say to them, I saw a dogman or a werewolf, people really, since they're so filled in the movies, there's so many werewolf movies and books and the media, I think that people just instantly disregard it, because if it's in a movie, it can't be real. There can't be any basis in reality for it. Whereas if you see other cryptids, such as a Bigfoot or what have you, a Yowie, then people are much more likely to say, well, it's possible, or if you see an alien, people say, maybe you're crazy, maybe you're not, but it's more accepted than if you go around saying, I saw a werewolf or I saw a dogman, this is what it is. And I think it's far more accepted to see other cryptids. Maybe people just don't want to accept that a creature like that could exist.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money with all those points that you made. Maybe people just don't want to accept the fact that these things are out there. It sure is a lot more comforting to think that they're not out there than to accept the fact that they are.
Exactly. They can't hurt you if they're not real, so.
Yeah, that's right. You've got some really good points that you made there. I want to ask you, you live in Gloucester right now, which you told me the house where you live at has got a lot more in the way of woods around it than where you had that encounter. That had to be kind of a hard move to make, considering what you had been through already.
My family and I made the move up here literally within a year of my sighting, of my experience. So, yeah, it was a very uncomfortable sort of first year here. We're living in town, and there's a lot of farmland and open fields around us, which makes me feel a little better. But within a 15, 20-minute drive, you can be in a national park or a state forest that'll just take an hour, 2 hours to drive through. We're smack bang in the middle of a very rural area.
Yeah, you could have them all around you and you wouldn't even know it.
Exactly. Yeah, the thought has crossed my mind. When we're out camping, I often think that. At first, we only camped in the car, which was great, because at least I felt that there was some metal between us and whatever else was out there. But lately, we've moved to the tent, and I think it's just something I'm going to have to learn to confront, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life living inside. And to be honest, I really don't think 4 walls and a door would stop it.
No, 4 walls and a door would not stop it. Being inside a car or a truck wouldn't stop one of these things.
It makes you feel better, though, if you are.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. It's a false comfort, though. You know deep down inside that if it wanted to, it could still get in. Not knowing the geography of Australia all that well, how close is Gloucester to the Blue Mountains? Because I know that there is activity, Dogman activity, going on in the Blue Mountains right now.
The Blue Mountains would probably be 4 to 6 hours away by freeway, by motorway, freeway, highway. Yeah, it's quite a drive. Quite a drive. In a straight line, probably a little closer, but it'd still be, hundreds of kilometres.
Yeah, if that's the case, then any dogman in that area wouldn't be a threat to you, that's for sure.
No, but I would say that Gloucester and its surrounds are very similar to parts of the Blue Mountains, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're down there. They might be here. I can't say.
Yeah, I hate to say it too, but I wouldn't be surprised if you did have your own population there, if you have that much habitat like that. You should know that there's a Yowie hunter who researches in the Blue Mountains that found some Type 3 Dogman prints. He sent those prints to me, and I posted them on the YouTube version of, I believe it was episode 28 of the show. As you work your way through the shows, Keiron, once you get up to episode 28, or if you decide to jump the gun and just go straight to the YouTube version of the show to take a look at the prints, I wanted to make sure that you knew that they were there. I think it was 3 photos maybe that I posted on that video that you'll be able to take a look at and everything.
I'll go and have a look later today. That'd be great.
Now, I know this is a pick'em question, but after having had that encounter, what do you think was the scariest part about having it?
It was either the eyes that looked straight at me and decided I wasn't even worthy of being prey, or it was just the pure sense of power from the creature. The two of them together was what really pushed me over the edge, I think. It's what freaked me out enough to walk inside like a zombie and grab a letter opener and climb into a wardrobe. Just that sense of being prey, being a rabbit.
Yeah, you're not used to that feeling. You're used to being on the top of the food chain. All of a sudden, you go out back late that night and find out that you're not on the top. You're a peg or two down. So that's only natural that you're going to feel that way. No one can blame you for that. Well, Keiron, at this point, it's about time to wrap the show up. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to make?
Not that I can think of.
That's all right. That's no problem at all. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing the details of your encounter with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, mate.
Oh, anytime. It's been great talking with you. Please don't be a stranger, okay?
No problem.
I really appreciate it. Well, have yourself a great night.
You have yourself a great night. It's daytime here, so I've got to go do some housework now.
Well, don't work too hard.
No, I'll try not to, mate.
That sounds good. Have a great night.
You too, mate.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter and you want to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.